The map room at the Mossad headquarters, north of Tel Aviv, was known as the Aquarium. It was a place where reality was unstitched and rewoven. In the late months of 2002, the air in the aquarium was thick with a singular problem: Iraq. The drumbeat from Washington was growing louder, a rhythmic pounding about weapons of mass destruction, satellite photos of mobile labs, and the urgent moral necessity of regime change. The Americans and the British were preparing for war, a conventional war of armor and air power. In the aquarium, however, the view was different. It was a parallax view, a perspective shifted by proximity and history. Yair Harel, a veteran Katsa case officer who now headed the Summit Division, responsible for recruiting and running human intelligence, studied the wall. It wasn't covered in target photos. It was covered in psychological profiles. At the center, magnified, was the face of Saddam Hussein. Surrounding him, like dark planets, were his sons, Uday and Qusay, his deputy, Izzat Ibrahim al-Duri, and the commanders of his Republican Guard. "They are looking for the wrong thing," Yair said, his voice low. He wasn't speaking to anyone in particular, but the half-dozen analysts in the room understood. "The Americans are looking for a what?" he continued, tapping a satellite image of a suspected chemical weapons depot. "They are looking for barrels, for centrifuges, for blueprints. They are searching for an object. But the regime is not an object. The regime is a belief." His colleagues knew this doctrine. Iraq was not a traditional state. It was a mukhabarat state, a nation held together by interlocking security services, family ties, and, above all, suffocating, paralyzing fear. Saddam's true weapon of mass destruction was not mustard gas. It was the Amn al-Qas, the special security organization. His true delivery system was not a missile. It was the whisper in a Baghdad coffee shop, the black car arriving at midnight, the terrible, unspoken knowledge that anyone, your cousin, your son, your general, could be an informer. "If we go looking for the what," Yair said, "we will be lost in the desert with them. We must target the belief. We must target the fear." The American plan was to shatter the regime with shock and awe. Yair's plan was different. It was silent, surgical, and built on a single, terrifying premise. Why bother fighting an army when you can convince its leader to execute it himself? The objective was clear and cold. Mossad would not try to find a conspiracy inside the Iraqi high command. They would create one. They would build a phantom army of traitors, complete with a leader, a motive, and a paper trail, and then they would leak this fabricated conspiracy, not to the Americans, but to the most paranoid man on earth, Saddam Hussein. The operation was given a code name, Babylon's Ghost. It wasn't about finding a smoking gun. It was about planting a seed of serpents in the mind of the king, a seed that would germinate in the dark and strangle the Iraqi Republican Guard from within. The war, Yair argued, could not be won in the streets of Baghdad. It had to be won first, inside Saddam's own skull. The battleground would be his paranoia. Amman, Jordan. The city was a lung, inhaling exiles and exhaling rumors. In the months leading up to the 2003 invasion, the Jordanian capital was the world's listening post for Iraq. Spies from the CIA, MI6, the French DGSE, and the Russian SVR crowded the lobbies of the Intercontinental and the Four Seasons, trading cash for gossip, trying to penetrate the black box of Baghdad. They were all hunting for the same thing, a high-level asset who could confirm the WMDs or offer a blueprint of the regime's collapse. Mossad, however, was not hunting. It was casting. Their line was tended by a woman named Dahlia. Her cover was as an antiquities dealer, a plausible, dusty identity that allowed her to interact with the steady stream of Iraqi businessmen and former officials who crossed the border. These men, cut off from their frozen bank accounts, were often selling family heirlooms, Sumerian seals, Abbasid coins, Ottoman jewelry, for survival. Dahlia's shop, a small cramped space near the old Roman amphitheater, was a known safe place to get a fair price. It was also a meticulously wired Mossad front. In early October, a new fish swam into the net. His name was Faris al-Jamil. He was a mid-level trader from Mosul, dealing in agricultural equipment, a business that had given him just enough status to travel but not enough wealth to be secure. Faris was not a political man. He was, however, a desperate one. Mossad's financial intelligence unit had flagged him months earlier. He had catastrophic gambling debts owed to a casino in Beirut. He was a classic mice recruit. Money, ideology, coercion, ego. Faris was Dalia met him on a Tuesday. He was selling a set of Assyrian gold earrings, his wife's, his hands visibly shaking. "These are beautiful," Dalia said, examining them under a loupe. "From Nimrud, perhaps, a tragedy to sell them." "Tragedy is the air we breathe," Faris muttered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "My children must eat." Dalia made the transaction. She paid him fairly in US dollars. Then, as he was counting the bills, she leaned in. "You deal in tractors, yes? John Deere parts, combines?" Faris stiffened. "Sometimes, when the oil for food program allows." "I have a client," Dalia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A Belgian agricultural consortium. They are looking to create a risk assessment for after the Americans come. They need to know which assets are intact, which roads are secure, which officials are practical." Faris understood immediately. This was not about tractors. This was intelligence. I am a patriot," he stammered. "Patriotism is for men who can feed their families," Dalia said softly. She slid a small, thick envelope across the glass counter. "This is not for you. This is for your children's education. My clients are very generous. They just need maps, lists, nothing political, just logistics." Faris looked at the envelope. It contained $10,000, more than his debt. "My clients," Dalia added, "also have friends in Beirut. They can make problems disappear." This was the 1-2 punch, the money and the subtle hint of coercion. Faris looked at the envelope, then at Dalia. Her eyes were empathetic, maternal, and completely devoid of pity. They were the eyes of a Katsa who had found her tool. "What maps?" Faris asked. He was in. He wasn't an asset. He was a cutout, a deniable link. He thought he was working for a Belgian company, passing low-level logistical data. He had no idea he was now the unwitting centerpiece of Operation Babylon's Ghost. He was the man who would, according to Mossad's script, serve as the intermediary for the most dangerous traitor in Iraq. Back in Tel Aviv, the aquarium was now a writer's room. They had their messenger, Faris, codenamed Pilgrim. Now they needed to invent their traitor. "It cannot be Qusay or Uday," said Ephraim, the head of the psychological analysis unit. "Saddam would never believe it. Blood is blood." "It cannot be Al-Duri," Yair added. "He is a fanatic. He is more Saddam than Saddam." "It has to be someone competent," a young analyst offered. "Someone the Americans would try to recruit. Someone they should recruit." They needed a devil, a plausible Judas. The target had to meet a precise profile: high rank, a general in the Republican Guard, high enough to command a key division; competent, a professional soldier, respected by his men and feared by the coalition; clean, not a member of the inner Takriti clan, someone Saddam trusted out of necessity, not family. This small seed of tribal difference was crucial. Pragmatic, someone who likely saw the war as unwinnable and might, plausibly, want to save his own skin or save Iraq from total destruction. They spent 72 hours running profiles through Mossad's massive database, cross-referencing SIGINT, signals intelligence, intercepts, reports from defectors, and financial records. Finally, they found him, General Ra'ad al-Hamdani. He was perfect, commander of the Medina Armored Division, one of the elite units tasked with defending the Baghdad box. He was a career officer, a veteran of the Iran-Iraq War. He was from a prominent Baghdad family, not a Takriti. He was known to be a brilliant tactician, but also a quiet man who disdained the excesses of Saddam's sons. He was, in short, exactly the kind of man the CIA would be desperate to flip. "Hamdani is our devil," Yair announced. "But he is loyal," the analyst protested. "Our human suggests he fears Saddam, but he is a patriot." "Good," Yair replied. "A loyal man's betrayal is all the more shocking," It proves the conspiracy is real. If he can be turned, then anyone can be turned. The plan was audacious. They would not contact General Hamdani. They would not risk approaching him. They would frame him from a distance using a campaign of fabricated evidence so subtle and so damning that Saddam's own security services would discover it and believe it was their own triumph of counterintelligence. The deception would have 3 phases. Phase 1, the rumor. They would use Pilgrim, Faris, to plant the first seed. Phase 2, the proof. They would use Mossad's technical branches to create a flawless, forged communication trail. Phase 3, the verification. They would stage a discovery that would make the Iraqi Mukhabarat, general intelligence, the heroes of the story, the ones who uncovered the plot. Yair looked at the general's face on the wall. "This man is a good soldier," he said quietly. "We are going to make his life a living hell, and in doing so, we are going to save thousands of our own." The moral calculus was brutal, but in the aquarium, it was the only math that mattered. The Iraqi embassy in Amman was a fortress of paranoia. The ambassador was a figurehead. The real power was the embassy's cultural attaché, a man named Sami al-Hadithi. Hadithi was, as Mossad's station in Amman well knew, the Mukhabarat's chief for Jordan. His job was to monitor the exile community, hunt defectors, and sniff out plots. Faris al-Jamil, Pilgrim, was given his first script. Dahlia delivered it in her antique shop, rolling it into a small scroll and placing it inside a replica Sumerian cylinder. "Your Belgian clients are worried," Dahlia explained, her voice calm. "The Americans are making overtures to Iraqi commanders. The Belgians are afraid their investments will be compromised if the army leadership changes. They need to know if General Hamdani is stable." Faris was terrified. This was a line he had not wanted to cross. "This is not about tractors," he whispered, his face pale. "This is about your family's future in Geneva," Dahlia replied, dangling the ego and money incentives. "A new life, or a return to Mosul. Perhaps the casino in Beirut sends men to Mosul. I don't know." The coercion was unspoken, but absolute. Faris, shaking, took the cylinder. His instructions were to meet Hadithi at a public cafe. He was not to act like a spy. He was to act like a greedy, worried businessman who had stumbled onto something he didn't understand. The meeting took place at the Al Bustan Cafe. The air was hazy with apple-scented hookah smoke. Hadithi, the Mukhabarat chief, was an imposing man with a thick mustache and dead eyes. "You waste my time, Faris?" Hadithi began. "God forbid, sir," Faris stammered, his rehearsed lines catching in his throat. "It is just, I hear things. From my cousins in the Medina division, my business partners. They are worried. They hear the Americans are talking to the general." Hadithi's expression did not change, but his fingers stopped tapping the table. "What Americans?" "I don't know," Faris said, playing the part of the fool perfectly. "They say contingencies. They say the general is a practical man. They say he is securing his future. I only tell you this because I am a loyal son of Iraq, and I worry for my contracts if the leadership is confused." Hadithi stared at him for a full minute. Faris felt a cold drop of sweat roll down his spine. The Mukhabarat man was deciding whether to believe him or arrest him. "You hear who say this?" Hadithi asked. "Businessmen, sir. Foreigners. They talk in the hotels. They think we do not understand English. They call him the man who can save Baghdad. I don't know what it means." "I am just a traitor," Hadithi grunted. "You are a fool, Faris. You listen to hotel gossip. Go back to your tractors." The meeting was over. Faris left the cafe convinced he had failed, his legs shaking so badly he had to lean against a wall. He had no idea he had just been lethally successful. Hadithi sat for another 10 minutes. The man who can save Baghdad. It was a CIA turn of phrase. It was exactly the kind of arrogance they would use. He returned to the embassy and encrypted a priority cable to Baghdad. It was flagged for the office of Qusay Hussein, head of the Republican Guard and the Amn al-Qaz. The report stated, source, Pilgrim, low-level greedy, reports hotel chatter from Western businessmen, unidentified, suggesting American contact with Jen-R al-Hamdani, Medina. Rumor suggests Hamdani is practical. In Tel Aviv, a Nevi'at, human agent monitoring the embassy's encrypted traffic, intercepted the cable. They decrypted it. Yair read the translation. A small smile touched his lips. "The seed is planted," he said. "Now, we water it." The second phase of Babylon's Ghost required a different kind of tradecraft. This was the work of Unit 8200, Mossad's formidable signals intelligence and code-breaking division, and the Yahalaman and Diamonds Unit, specialists in forging documents, audio and video. The goal: create a body of evidence so compelling it would turn the Mukhabarat's suspicion of General Hamdani into absolute certainty. First, they needed to prove Hamdani was communicating. For weeks, Unit 8200 had been intercepting all of Hamdani's communications. His battlefield radio chatter, his secure line calls to Baghdad, even his personal emails to his son studying in London. They weren't looking for secrets. They were looking for patterns. They fed thousands of hours of his voice into an audio deepfake program, then in its infancy but already potent. They mapped his linguistic tics. He never said yes, he said it is known. He referred to Saddam as the President Commander, never just the President. The Yahaloman team then drafted the smoking gun, a series of encrypted messages supposedly sent from Hamdani to a handler. The handler was designated as a CIA case officer operating out of the U.S. Embassy in Ankara, Turkey. The content of the messages was crafted by the psychological warfare team. They were intentionally ambiguous, filled with deniable code words that would seem obvious to a paranoid interceptor. Message 1. The patient's fever is high. The family is worried. We must prepare for a British doctor, not an American one. Translation for the Mukhabarat. The regime is unstable. My family, the division, is ready. We will coordinate with British forces, who were assigned the southern sector, not the main American assault. Message 2. The wedding gift for my son has been secured. The Swiss account is satisfactory. Please confirm the travel arrangements for the extended family. Translation: I've been paid. The money is in Switzerland. Confirm the exfiltration plan for my command staff. Now they had to leak these messages. They couldn't just give them to the Iraqis. They had to be stolen. Mossad activated a long-dormant asset inside the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This asset, a low-level clerk with a penchant for high-stakes poker, was instructed to find a classified intelligence summary from the U.S. Embassy on his supervisor's desk. The summary, entirely fabricated by Mossad, detailed promising contact with a high-level Iraqi asset, codenamed Baghdad Lion. The Turkish asset, believing he was selling a real American secret, sold the document to the highest bidder, the Mukhabarat station chief in Ankara. The stolen document landed on the same desk in Baghdad as Faris's rumor. Suddenly, the rumor was no longer gossip. It was a high-level conspiracy. The codename Baghdad Lion was immediately, and correctly as Mossad intended, linked to General Hamdani, commander of the Medina Lion Division. The circle was tightening. But Yair needed one final physical piece of evidence. He needed to put the money in the general's hand. General Hamdani was a professional soldier. He had no Swiss bank account. He had no foreign assets. His entire life was his service. Mossad was about to change that. This was a job for the Qaidon, bayonet, the elite operational arm of Mossad's Caesarea division. It required a high-risk black operation on neutral European soil. Two Qaidon operatives, a man and a woman posing as a wealthy Argentine couple, flew to Geneva. They entered a private bank known for its discretion and its numbered accounts. Their legend, cover story, was that they were establishing a trust for a business partner in the Middle East. The bank, eager for the massive cash deposit, asked few questions. The operatives used a set of expertly forged Iraqi diplomatic credentials, not in Hamdani's name, but in the name of a distant cousin. They opened a numbered account. The trigger for the account, the name required for access, was Ra'ad al-Hamdani. They deposited $250,000 in cash. The next day, a second Mossad team, this one from the technological branch, executed a man-in-the-middle cyber attack on the bank's internal servers. It was a digital, soft touch. They didn't steal anything. They just altered a single line of data. They changed the origin of funds notation from cash deposit, Geneva, to wire transfer, U.S. Treasury, Ankara. The trap was set. Now they just had to get the Iraqis to look. Dahlia reactivated Pilgrim, Faris. This time, the Belgian consortium was in a panic. They found out their competitor, an American group, is also trying to move assets. Dahlia told Faris, her voice tight with anxiety. They say the Americans are paying their Iraqi partners through Switzerland. They gave me this. She handed Faris a piece of paper. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a simple payment advice slip, a standard business form, flawlessly forged. It showed a consulting fee of $250,000 paid to Baghdad Lion with an account number at a specific Geneva bank. My clients need to know if this is real, Dahlia said. They are afraid General Hamdani is playing both sides. Faris, now in too deep to refuse, understood. He was to pass this to his Mukhabarat handler, Sami al-Hadithi. This time, Faris didn't go to a cafe. He demanded a meeting at a safe hotel, trying to act like a seasoned operative. Hadithi met him, contempt barely concealed. More hotel gossip, Faris? Faris slid the payment advice across the table. My source says this is the Americans' payment to Hamdani, the Baghdad Lion. He says the account is in Geneva. Hadithi looked at the paper. His blood ran cold. This was no rumor. This was a number. This was a bank. He dismissed Faris and ran to the embassy. Within an hour, the Iraqi Mukhabarat activated its own dormant asset inside the Geneva bank. A disgruntled teller. They cabled him the account number and asked for a simple ledger check. The teller logged in. He found the account. He saw the $250,000. And checking the source, he saw exactly what Mossad's tech team wanted him to see. Wire transfer, U.S. Treasury, Ankara. The teller reported back to Baghdad. Confirmation. Account exists. Funded by U.S. government source. In Saddam Hussein's presidential palace, the report was delivered to Qusay. The rumor from a frantic trader, the stolen file from Turkey, and the hard financial proof from a trusted asset in Switzerland all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. General Ra'ad al-Hamdani, the hero of the Iran-Iraq War, commander of the Medina Division, was a CIA traitor. For General Hamdani, the war was coming, and he was preparing his men for a fight he knew would be hopeless. He drilled them relentlessly, planning fallback positions, trying to give them a fighting chance against the American M1 Abrams tanks and Apache helicopters. He was a soldier, focused on the sand, the fuel, and the maps. He never saw the threat coming from behind him. On a cold night in late February 2003, just 3 weeks before the invasion, Hamdani was in his command bunker south of Baghdad. He was reviewing aerial reconnaissance photos when the door burst open. It was not the army. It was the Amn al-Qas, the special security organization. They wore black uniforms, and their faces were masked. They were Qusay's personal guard, the regime's butchers. General Ra'ad al-Hamdani, their commander said, his voice flat. By order of the President Commander, you are under arrest for high treason. Hamdani's guards reached for their weapons. Stand down, Hamdani ordered them. He was confused, but he was still a loyal officer. This had to be a mistake. Treason? Hamdani said, standing up. On what grounds? I am a loyal son of Iraq. Your loyalty is to the bankers in Geneva, the commander sneered. He held up the Geneva bank statement, which the Mukhabarat had proudly provided. Your loyalty is to the Baghdad Lion. Hamdani looked at the paper. He saw the account number. He saw his name. He saw the U.S. Treasury notation. It was a language he did not understand. It was like looking at a photograph of himself committing a murder he had never imagined. This is not real, he stammered. This is a fabrication. It's the Americans. It's a trick. Yes, the commander said, pressing a pistol to Hamdani's temple. You are the trick. He was dragged out of his bunker. His command staff, his most loyal colonels and majors, were rounded up in the same motion. They were all implicated by association. The Medina Division was decapitated. General Hamdani was taken to the Hakmiya prison in Baghdad. He was never seen again. The questioning was brutal, designed not to find the truth, but to extract confessions that would validate the regime's paranoia. Hamdani, a professional soldier, was subjected to unspeakable horrors, all while confessing to his role as Baghdad Lion, a conspiracy invented from whole cloth in Tel Aviv. But the win for Mossad was not just the removal of one general. It was the infection. Saddam Hussein did not stop with Hamdani. If the Medina division was compromised, who else? The ghost conspiracy became real. Saddam, fueled by Qusay's brilliant counterintelligence discovery, launched a full-blown purge of the Republican Guard. The purge was swift and merciless. The commander of the Hammurabi division was arrested because he was Hamdani's cousin by marriage. The entire logistics corps of the Special Republican Guard was detained because they had failed to notice the traitors' fictional communications. Dozens of the most competent, battle-hardened, and professional officers, the very men the coalition feared, were pulled from the front lines. They were replaced by green, terrified loyalists from Tikrit, men chosen for their family ties, not their military skill. In the aquarium in Tel Aviv, Yair Harel crossed Hamdani's name off the board. He was not happy. This was not a celebration. It was a liquidation. "The head is severed," he said. "The body will now die." March 20th, 2003. The shock and awe campaign began. Cruise missiles slammed into Baghdad, turning night into day. The coalition ground invasion, led by the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division, crossed the berm from Kuwait. The coalition war plan was built on a central assumption: a brutal multi-week battle against the Republican Guard divisions defending Baghdad. The Medina, the Hammurabi, the Adnan, these were the red lines on the map, the elite, dug-in forces that were expected to fight to the death. The battle for the Baghdad airport alone was projected to cost thousands of American lives. The 3rd ID pushed north, bracing for the first massive counterattack from the Medina division. They reached the Karbala Gap, a natural choke point. This is where Hamdani, the brilliant tactician, had planned his kill box. This is where the war was supposed to truly begin. The Americans advanced. And nothing. There was no counterattack. There was no coordinated artillery. The Americans found abandoned T-72 tanks, many without fuel. They found command bunkers filled with half-eaten meals. The Medina division, its entire command structure executed or imprisoned by its own side, had ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force. The new, loyal general who replaced Hamdani had fled his post at the first sound of a B-52. His colonels, seeing their commander vanish, followed suit. The soldiers, leaderless, confused and terrified, simply melted away. They stripped off their uniforms and walked home. It was the same story with the Hammurabi division. And the Adnan, the Praetorian Guard of Baghdad, the force that was supposed to inflict catastrophic casualties on the coalition, had been clinically neutralized before the first American tank crossed the border. The win was not just strategic, it was psychological. The Iraqi soldiers who did remain, like the Fedayeen, fought with suicidal bravery, but as isolated units, not as an army. The central nervous system had been severed. On April 9th, American forces rolled into Firdos Square. The battle for Baghdad was not a battle at all. It was a procession. In Amman, Dahlia met Faris al-Jamil one last time. He was a wreck, having heard rumors of the purges. "The Belgians are very pleased," Dahlia said. She handed him a briefcase. Inside was a new passport for a new country and enough money to last a lifetime. "Your family is already waiting for you in Rio de Janeiro." What did I do?" Faris whispered. "You were a good businessman," Dahlia said. "You saved your family." Faris, the pilgrim, vanished, his role in history erased. The war for Iraq was over in 21 days. The statue of Saddam fell in Firdos Square, a symbolic end to a regime that had already, in secret, hollowed itself out. In Washington, it was hailed as a military triumph, a validation of the shock and awe doctrine. The speed of the collapse was stunning. In Tel Aviv, the mood was more sober. Yair Harel and his team watched the same images of the statue falling. They knew what the Americans did not, that the victory was not one of air power, but of deception. The win was total. Mossad had achieved every one of its objectives. Neutralize the Republican Guard, Achieved. They were dismantled by their own leader. Ensure a swift, low casualty for the coalition. War. Achieved. The lightning-fast collapse prevented a bloody urban war, which would have destabilized the region and potentially drawn in other actors. Remove Saddam. Achieved. The regime collapsed from within, its psychological pillars shattered before the physical ones were even touched. But the victory was a mirage. It was an intelligence masterpiece that served a flawed strategy. The Americans, still obsessed with the what, began the hunt for the WMDs. They sent teams to the depots, the factories, the sites that Mossad knew were empty. The intelligence that had mattered, the psychological intelligence, was now useless. The deception had been too effective. Babylon's ghost had created a power vacuum. The Iraqi state had not just been defeated, it had been dissolved. The very men who might have maintained order, professional soldiers like Hamdani, who were nationalists but not fanatics, were dead or disgraced. The Mukhabarat and the Amn al-Qas, the security services that had been tricked into eating their own, were the first to go. But their files, their networks, and their brutal skills did not disappear. They simply went to new masters. The decapitation had, in effect, released thousands of angry, unemployed, and highly trained intelligence and military officers into the wild. In the aquarium, Yair watched the first reports of a new phenomenon, an insurgency. He saw the names of former regime elements, Ba'athists, and Republican Guard officers, the remnants of the very army he had helped shatter, forming new, deadlier groups. The win, it turned out, was just the prelude. The accounting of Babylon's ghost was classified at the highest level. It was one of Mossad's most successful tactical deceptions and one of its most strategically complex legacies. The assets. Pilgrim, Faris al-Jamil, exfiltrated to Brazil, lived out his life in quiet prosperity, never knowing he had been a Mossad tool. Dalia, the Katsa, returned to Tel Aviv, promoted, moved on to the Iran desk, where the game continued. The Turkish asset, paid and decommissioned, believed he had sold a real American secret. The Swiss bank teller remained in place, a dormant Mukhabarat asset who, after the fall of Baghdad, became a free agent, later providing services to other regimes. The targets: General Ra'ad al-Hamdani, executed by the Amn al-Qas, circa March 2003. His name was never cleared. He remains in the official and now defunct Ba'athist records, a traitor. The Medina Division Officer Corps. An estimated 42 senior officers were executed or disappeared in the Hamdani purge. These were the only men who could have held the division together. Saddam Hussein, found in a hole, his paranoia having consumed him. The deception operation had simply been one more voice in the chorus of his own internal demons. The fallout. The immediate fallout was the easy war. The long-term fallout was the hard peace. The intelligence community is a world of second and third order consequences. The win of 2003, the neutralization of the Iraqi army, had directly, unintentionally, laid the groundwork for the next decade of chaos. The ghost conspiracy had broken the Iraqi state, and into that vacuum flooded new ghosts, insurgents, sectarian militias, and eventually the black flag of ISIS, which would be led by many of the same disenfranchised, cashiered officers Mossad had helped Saddam purge. Yair Harel, looking back years later, would call it the perfect operation that led to the imperfect outcome. They had set out to win the war, and they had, but they had not, and could not, plan for the peace. The deception was a masterpiece of tradecraft. It was forensic, precise, and lethal. It proved that a single, well-placed idea, a single whisper, amplified by technology and a deep understanding of human psychology, could be more powerful than an armored division. It was a victory, but a victory that left a bitter taste. In the Mossad archives, the file for Babylon's ghost is sealed. It is a case study in psychological warfare, a masterclass in exploiting an enemy's own cognitive weaknesses. The operation is studied by Katsa trainees, not as a political victory, but as a technical one. It is the art of weaponized narrative. The story is not about WMDs. It was never about WMDs. It was about perceived reality. Mossad understood that Saddam's regime was a theater state. It was a performance of power, held together by the audiences, the Iraqi people's belief that the power was absolute. Mossad did not attack the stage. They rewrote the script, handing it to the lead actor, Saddam. They made him the tragic hero of his own downfall, a modern Othello, convinced by a forged handkerchief, a Swiss bank statement, to kill his most loyal soldier, Hamdani's Desdemona. The win was real. The war was won before it began. The Republican Guard, the only force that could have made the invasion a bloody quagmire, was eliminated without a single Israeli or coalition shot fired at it. It committed suicide, by order of its own commander. This is the hidden history of the Iraq War. It is not a story of tank battles or airstrikes. It is a story of a whisper in an Amman cafe, a forged bank transfer in Geneva, and a deep-fake audio file created in a Tel Aviv lab. It is the story of how an intelligence agency, by understanding the mind of its enemy, could defeat his army before the first tanks ever rolled. The lesson of Babylon's ghost is enduring. The most powerful weapon in the modern arsenal is not the bomb. It is the narrative. And whoever controls the narrative controls the battlefield, even before the battle begins. Victory in espionage is rarely clean. It does not come with parades or medals. It comes as a quiet report, a file stamped, closed, and the cold knowledge of the second-order effects. The win of Babylon's ghost was absolute. It was a flawless tactical execution that saved, by conservative estimates, thousands of coalition lives, and, in the short term, preserved Israeli regional stability by ensuring the rapid, total collapse of a hostile neighbor. But the echo of the deception lingers. In the years that followed, as Iraq descended into a sectarian civil war, the win looked different. The ghost that Mossad had created, the phantom conspiracy of General Hamdani, was replaced by thousands of real ones. The operation that so perfectly decapitated the Iraqi army had also inadvertently shattered the Iraqi state, creating a void that would be filled by forces far more chaotic and unpredictable than Saddam Hussein ever was. Yair Harel retired, but he never forgot the face of General Hamdani, the loyal soldier they had sacrificed on the altar of a greater good. Was it worth it? That is a question for politicians, not for intelligence officers. The Quds's job is not to ask why, it is to ask how. And how they did it was to prove an ancient truth, that the strongest fortress is not made of stone or steel, but of belief. And the most devastating weapon is the one that turns that belief inward, transforming a shield into a sword. Mossad did not defeat Saddam's army. They simply convinced Saddam to do it for them. They won the war before it began, but in doing so, they wrote the first invisible chapter of the next one. The echo of that deception, that perfect, terrible, clinical win, still defines the sands of Mesopotamia today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If you found this investigation compelling, please take a moment to subscribe and click the notification bell. It ensures you won't miss our next operation. We'll see you on the next file.